Elise Hand. I'll be your moderator today. Hard copies of today's news release, as well as the ministerial directive, are available here in the room. Everyone has one of those, I hope. And for those who did not register to receive the embargo copies earlier, they are circulating if you haven't had one. Attorney General and Minister of Justice Scott Armstrong is joined today by Dr. Robert Strang, Chief Medical Officer of Health. Minister Armstrong is going to open with remarks, followed by remarks from Dr. Strang, and then we'll take questions from the room and from Zoom. And with that, I'll turn over the floor to Minister Armstrong.
Well, thank you. Today, I want to speak directly to Nova Scotians about an issue that has grown into a serious challenge for public safety and public health in our province: the rapid expansion of illegal, unregulated cannabis dispensaries. Cannabis is legal in Canada, but it is only legal when sold through the regulated system. In Nova Scotia, that is under the Cannabis Control Act. The Nova Scotia Liquor Corporation is the only legal retailer of recreational cannabis. That system exists to keep young people as safe as possible, ensure products are tested and traceable, and prevent criminal involvement in the supply chain. Over the past several years, however, we have now seen a dramatic increase in illegal dispensaries across the province. Our preliminary review shows at least 118 illegal outlets across Nova Scotia, while there are only 51 legal Nova Scotia Liquor Corporation cannabis stores. Think about that. There's more than twice the number of legal stores. This growing, parallel, unregulated market poses unacceptable risks. Illegal dispensaries are not subject to any oversight at all. There are no age verification requirements, no mandatory training, and no product testing. Consumers have no way of knowing what they are buying, who is behind these operations, or where the products actually come from. These conditions have opened the door to organized crime, money laundering, and even human trafficking. Police are already confronting these risks, and that work is ongoing. But the challenge continues to evolve, and our response needs to evolve as well. Protecting Nova Scotians means strengthening our efforts, advancing new measures, and shutting down the shadow market before it causes more harm. So that is why today I have directed law enforcement agencies to prioritize enforcement for all illegal cannabis activities across the province. While policing bodies are independent and will determine their own investigative strategies and enforcement measures, I have made it very clear that the status quo in Nova Scotia is not an option. Illegal dispensaries endanger consumers, put our youth at risk, erode our regulated system, and undermine our efforts to create healthy, safe communities. That is what today's announcement is all about, and we are ready as a government to follow through. Thank you, and I'll ask Dr. Strang to say a few words from the public health perspective, and then we'll be happy to answer your questions.
Thank you, Minister Armstrong, and good morning, everyone. From a public health perspective, we know that illegal cannabis can be dangerous and poses specific health risks because it's unregulated. As Minister Armstrong mentioned, this is concerning for the health protection of all Nova Scotians, and especially our youth. With the high number of illegal dispensaries in our communities, it is especially concerning to me that this only increases visibility and accessibility, normalizing cannabis for youth. And all of this has a significant influence on them. Only cannabis sold by NSLC is from licensed growers and is approved for sale. All other cannabis has no lab testing, no ingredient controls, and no oversight. And the NSLC is the only legal retailer in the province for safe, regulated cannabis. Illegal cannabis can lead to poisoning or death. And no matter the source, high-potency cannabis products, particularly concentrates, pose a serious health risk of psychotic symptoms, anxiety, and dependence. Also, smoked or vape products have more health risks than other forms, such as edibles and oils. If you choose to use cannabis, be informed first. More information is available online at Health Canada's low-risk cannabis use guidelines. Make the choice to use it responsibly and legally, and encourage everyone to know the laws, understand the risks, and protect your safety and the safety of others. Thank you.
Thanks both, and we've allotted 45 minutes for questions, so go ahead.
Minister, back in April, your government did a deal with the Mi'kmaq that would allow them to open legal cannabis dispensaries on reserve. At that time, there was only one legal one. How many are there now?
Well, I don't think there's been any change. We are still very supportive of that program. I've actually written all the First Nations bands. We want to work with them. They want anyone in their community to be as safe as any Nova Scotian, of any parent. And we want to make sure that we have any cannabis being dispensed in Nova Scotia through the Nova Scotia Liquor Corporation, because that protects public health and public safety. So we have a program where First Nations bands can participate in legal cannabis distribution with the proceeds staying in community. And that accomplishes the three goals I want to see. One, youth will be protected because the Nova Scotia Liquor Corporation have trained staff and work to keep it out of the hands of children. The product that we sold through those Nova Scotia Liquor Corporations, whether on reserve or off reserve, has been approved by Health Canada from licensed providers, and it keeps the proceeds out of the supply chain of the organized crime networks. It'll keep it in the communities where it can do its best work.
This letter today makes it sound like that effort was a failure then, in April.
No, there are ongoing negotiations that continue. We're hoping that we can expand that program because we want to support First Nations in this field, but we want to make sure those three priorities are established.
They say they have a treaty right to sell marijuana. What do you say?
That has not been established. Right now, the Cannabis Control Act in Nova Scotia is the law of the land. As the Minister of Justice and Attorney General, it's my job to make sure that laws are enforced, and those laws apply to everyone across the province.
I want to take a step back on Paul's question there. That new regulations came out in April, but we've heard that no Indigenous First Nations have come on board with an agreement with that. Are you disappointed by that, or is this going to take time?
I think it's going to take some time because there's going to be ongoing discussions with First Nations bands about this. What's important is that we are going to direct the police to protect our youth, to protect our communities, and keep the public safety of Nova Scotians out front. But we also want to support First Nations communities as well. They're going to be a partner in this, and we're hoping to continue to work with them to establish a legal cannabis distribution network on reserve.
Given that no partnerships have been established yet, I mean, what's that signal?
Well, I think you'll see ongoing discussions. I'm focused today as the Minister of Justice and Attorney General on dealing with the illegal distribution of cannabis across the province because of the health and safety concerns it establishes. Working with First Nations bands will continue to happen. I'm hopeful that we can establish a safe program on reserve. But what's really important is that we make sure the health and safety of all Nova Scotians, particularly our youth, are protected.
What is the holdup there, though? What are the First Nations members in this conversation telling you is the problem? Why haven't they signed on?
Well, I'm not involved directly in those negotiations, so I haven't asked them why they haven't. That's not part of what my department does. We're the Department of Justice. But what I would hope is that if the First Nations bands across the province want to be part of cannabis distribution, they will partner with the province and we can do things safely.
If you're cracking down on their dispensaries on reserve, are you not curious about what would hold them back from getting involved with the legal system here?
Look, there are dispensaries on and off reserve all across the province. This is not about First Nations. We have a program we can partner with them, but this is about making sure any illegal cannabis that's being sold in Nova Scotia cease to exist because of the health concerns, the safety concerns, the dangers to youth, and the involvement now, an increasing involvement from talking to police across the province of organized crime. We need to deal with this. It's a public safety and health concern. We'll continue to work with First Nations and hopefully they'll partner with us to be involved in this. But first and foremost, we must make sure the laws that are currently written in Nova Scotia are enforced for all Nova Scotians.
Does the directive result in more resources to police?
We'll have a discussion with police about this. It is a priority for government. And as Attorney General and the Minister of Justice, I will work with all police agencies across the province to make sure they have resources in place to deal with a growing challenge.
So in your letter, you say that you've gotten a number of requests to date from chiefs seeking provincial support for their own systems that may deviate. So does that not tell you that there's a demand or a way that they want to be separate from the provincial system?
I think it shows us that they want to make sure they deal with an ongoing challenge in their communities as well as every community across the province. We want to make sure that the current law as it is in the books is established and supported and enforced across the province. What those requests have shown me is that they recognize a growing challenge as well, and this has to be controlled. This is the approach the province is going to take, and we're prepared to work with them to establish a separate system, but with controlled substance that's coming from a licensed producer through the Nova Scotia Liquor Corporation. We think that satisfies the three requirements of protecting youth, protecting public health and safety, and keeping the proceeds out of organized crime's hands, who use it for very nefarious activities like cocaine smuggling, illegal firearms, and human trafficking. This is a growing challenge in Nova Scotia. We've seen an increase in organized crime throughout the system, and we need to tackle this head on.
You're going to be seeing police, for example, shutting down the 3 or 4 marijuana sales places that are on the Highway 102 just outside Truro. That seems to be one of the more blatant flouting of the rules.
Well, you know, the police investigation and the strategies they use to deal with this is up to them. We don't direct police on how they approach doing their job. What we're saying to them today is this is also a provincial priority. I'll be working with police to see what resources they need, but the strategy and their investigations will really be up to them. They're an independent police force across Nova Scotia, and we'll be supporting them in their activities.
They're under your direction as Attorney General.
I can direct them what the priorities of the provinces are, but in terms of their operations, their investigations, and the strategies they use to enforce the law, they have some independence there.
But I think if you were trying to send a message, those are the most blatant examples. I mean, shutting them down would probably send a message, wouldn't it?
We're not targeting anyone. Like I said, there's illegal cannabis distributors across the province. We'll leave it to the police agencies across Nova Scotia. We have 11 different agencies providing police services. Each one of them will be required to work with this directive to make sure they enforce their own jurisdictions.
Targeting anyone, but your letter is addressed to the chiefs.
Well, that's one part of this. You know, we're writing a directive to the police agencies. We're asking the First Nations communities to support us in this. Like, they've approached us in the past to see what we can do to try to get some regulations around this. But the Cannabis Control Act is the law of the land. It needs to be enforced. And the emphasis we're putting on it now as a government is because of the growing proliferation of these illegal dispensaries and the increased involvement that we've determined from listening to our police intelligence services on the involvement of organized crime through these dispensaries.
A dramatic increase. Do you have some numbers?
I don't have them in front of me, but all you have to do is drive around the province and look to see how this is a growing industry. And we know why it's growing, because there's heavy involvement of people outside Nova Scotia using these dispensaries to fund other illegal activities as well.
Dr.
Can
Strang.
you give more details about the role of the RCMP in that case? What are they going to do exactly?
Well, as I said, we are providing them a directive that the law must be enforced. It's a provincial priority. That's what the government's position is. What they do in terms of operations is their responsibility. They have independence on that. We don't direct them on specific actions. What we're concerned about is that they take actions to enforce the law as it's written in Nova Scotia today, to protect children, protect public health and safety, and to deal with organized crime, a growing issue of organized crime.
There are
Dr.
numerous court
Strange?
cases moving through the systems related to treaty rights and cannabis dispensary owners who are Mi'kmaq who claim that treaty right. Depending on the results of that, how does that impact the province's priorities here? Would you reconsider based on what the court may find in that case?
Look, I mean, I can only go with the law as it's written today, and that is the Cannabis Control Act. We've had one case in Nova Scotia which determined that, you know, treaty rights would not be affected by this. As the Minister of Justice and Attorney General, I have to deal with the laws as they are in the books. I can't really deal with hypothetical situations as they determine. So whatever happens down the road, we will work with. But right now, the Cannabis Control Act is the law of the land, and we're asking our police forces to enforce it as a priority for the province of Nova Scotia.
In this press release, you have 118 illegal outlets that operating. I understand based on this other document that that's 118 just on First Nations reserves. How many are outside of that? Because this directive seems very clearly targeted towards
My
Indigenous.
information is that right now there's 118 illegal cannabis dispensaries across the province, not just on reserve, but I'll have to check those numbers and get back to you.
Letter
Letter
here is
then
incorrect. Because that says 118 on reserve First Nations. How many are off?
We will check those numbers and get back to you.
Don't actually know the scope of the problem. It seems like it's a little premature to be going after the chiefs here.
I'm not going after anyone. I'm going after organized crime and trying to protect the children and communities in this province. This is not a First Nations issue. This is a public health and safety issue.
Worried that you're issuing directives to police to crack down on a problem when apparently you don't actually know the full scope of the problem.
I'm fully aware of the scope of the problem. My understanding and my information was that there's 118 illegal dispensaries across the province, both on and off reserve. We'll have to get, I can check that data with my staff, but that's the information I have.
Should,
There
because
needs to be a correction here, because that number is not what we have in front of us. So with that, why did you choose to issue this letter to all chiefs instead of corresponding individually with the ones who have brought forward their framework? I understand from my conversations with them that they have ideas for health concerns, for safe growers, for ensuring that youth are not touching this stuff. Why not continue those conversations instead of putting this letter forward?
Because the Cannabis Control Act is uniform across the province. That is the law of the land. We wanted to make sure we communicated to all stakeholders, including our First Nations community, who we support in dealing with this, in a consistent way so they're all getting the same message at the same time from the province.
someone might say, this isn't about public health. This is about one cannabis retailer trying to drive out their competition.
That's not accurate. I think Dr. Strang's comments have been very, very clear. This is a public health issue. Maybe you can comment on some of the damages we're doing to youth around the province.
So, yeah, you can argue about the numbers, but I don't think anybody who's driven around the province in the last couple of years would be unaware of the significant proliferation. I certainly haven't seen this. And I put on my hat as a public health physician, also as a hat as a parent and as a community member. I have been increasingly concerned about the impact of this proliferation on youth, making cannabis much more accessible, much more visible, absolutely normalizing cannabis in our communities, as well as all the safety concerns from an unregulated supply. This is certainly a growing public health and public safety issue. And as ongoing discussions with First Nations communities, that's a separate piece, but I welcome and am completely supportive of taking action now, working with our law enforcement colleagues around dealing with this growing and significant public health and public safety issue.
Do you know if any of the cannabis that's been being sold at these unlicensed places has been tested to see whether in fact there are any issues with purity or with additives or any of the other concerns you raised in your opening remarks?
I don't have any data on that, but we know from that was one of the key points of creating a legal cannabis framework. Then you have certainty of supply, certainty around concentration, certainty around ingredients, controls over the ability around advertising. All those things are not there for an illegal market. And so there's again, that all contributes to this growing and significant public health and public safety issue.
You're aware, I mean, most studies show all cannabis, whether it's legal or illegal, is harmful to people's health.
So lots of other things that we accept are used in society. That was the whole point of legalizing cannabis a number of years ago. Accepting the fact that people are using it, but let's create a legal, regulated supply that minimizes the public health and public safety concerns. And I was fully supportive and remains fully supportive of that. It creates the ability then to engage Nova Scotians around how do you, if you choose to use cannabis, how do you do it in the safest manner possible, reducing the risk to yourself and others. You don't have any of those tools when it's an illegal, unregulated supply.
Given the public health concerns, having spoken to a number of folks who are involved in Indigenous-owned dispensaries, they are also concerned about the public health, and they have, in my understanding, put forward plans to the province that would show how they could regulate their growers and ensure their products are safe. Why would the province not consider pursuing something like that, coming to an agreement instead of putting something like this out?
In Canada, Health Canada is the one that licenses producers across the province. As the Attorney General and Chief Law Enforcement Officer, I want to make sure that that product that has been approved, that has been tested, that is consistent, that we know what the potency of the cannabis is, are the products that are distributed. So as I said, we're willing to work with First Nations, but we have to ensure that the supply is from a Health Canada approved supplier in the province. And right now, the law in Nova Scotia is the only distribution agent is the Nova Scotia Liquor Corporation. That is the law, and that's what we've asked the police to enforce today.
So were these dispensaries to only sell perhaps this cannabis that has been approved by Health Canada, would that then be okay?
This is why we've approached them to talk about having Nova Scotia Liquor Corporation stores on reserve, where they're allowed to keep the profits from those sales in community, which will be used for positive things in that community, and also keeps those profits out of the hands of organized crime. So there is a process where First Nations can partner with the province, can partner with Nova Scotia Liquor Corporation, and that would ensure a safe supply in the materials they sell because it is from a Health Canada approved supplier.
And if they don't want to partner, like we haven't seen anyone partner yet, is there an avenue for them, another avenue for to create their own system?
Right. Due to the Cannabis Control Act is very clear. The only licensed distributor in Nova Scotia is the Nova Scotia Liquor Corporation. That is the law of the land at this time. So, right now that's not a consideration. We're trying to put forward a system where they can participate, where public health is protected, our youth are protected, we keep the profits out of the hands of organized crime, and the proceeds will remain on First Nations community. But as I said, this is not a First Nations issue. And I don't want to focus on that. This is an issue for all Nova Scotians. It's not just First Nations that are engaged in this. Organized crime works with every Nova Scotian. They're trying to approach us across the province, and we have to deal with this. So, enforcement is not just on First Nations at all. This is for any illegal dispensary, and some are big and some are small. Some are probably linked to organized crime, some are not. But we need to approach this as a province-wide health and safety issue, and that's what today's directive was about.
Is there concern about the chiefs? I mean, there's a First Nations chief who's asked the province to stop asking police to crack down while they go about creating their own path to creating a legal framework. Have you heard those concerns?
I've not personally heard those concerns, but what I will say is the law in Nova Scotia right now, in the Cannabis Control Act, is pretty clear. And with the proliferation we've seen, with the heavy involvement of organized crime that our police intelligence services have reported to our department, something has to be done and has to be done now. We'll have ongoing negotiations and discussions with First Nations bands on the opportunity they have, but right now, the only legal distributor of cannabis in Nova Scotia is the Nova Scotia Liquor Corporation.
Other one, sorry, how do you measure the crackdown or the enforcement? What are you hoping to see next there?
Well, we'll be working with our law enforcement and our police services across the province. Part of my directive, if you read it, talks about trying to limit the supply of illegal cannabis coming into the province, dealing with it at its source, because it's not all about dispensaries. It's also about where does this product come from? How's it getting here? What's actually in it? Right? What potency does it have? Right? We need to actually take this on not just as a dispensary issue. There's also a supply issue, and that's where organized crime is involved. So one of the things I've dictated in that directive is I'd like to see them focus a lot on supply and make sure that we protect that supply that's coming in from a legal producer, which has been approved by Health Canada.
Do you think the proliferation of these illegal dispensaries is tied to the way that Nova Scotia has gone about legalization? Unlike Ontario, BC, many other provinces that allow private outlets to be licensed, perhaps they have less illegal dispensaries than us. Do you think that our approach to this has impacted this boom in illegal dispensaries?
I don't really have an opinion on that. I know where we are now. The information that I'm getting as Minister of Justice has dictated to me just how severe this problem is and how we're kind of almost at a tipping point because it's getting quite out of control in terms of what is happening across the province with the recent proliferation. How we got here is not important to me. It's what we do from now and moving forward, which is important, and we have to deal with this issue, and we have to deal with it very quickly.
Given the value of what these 118 shops are bringing in, do you know, I guess, how much money is involved in the shadow market?
There's no regulation of this, so we would have no way in knowing. This isn't about money to me. This is about public health and safety and protecting our youth. The money is not something that's important, I think, in this. We want to make sure that we have a system which accomplishes the three goals that was intended to when it was first developed: protecting youth, public health and safety, and controlling the resources from this so they don't lead to a proliferation of harder drugs, importing of illegal weapons, and human trafficking and other serious issues like that. We want to make sure that this system is not funding those type of nefarious activities.
Given that you believe this problem has boomed out of control, would you consider or recommend that the province consider a privatized regulation system similar to other provinces in order to sort of crack down on this and keep it legal in the ways that you're describing?
Right now, as the Attorney General, my job is to work with police to enforce the law as it exists, which is the Cannabis Control Act. It's not my intention, nor is it my priority to try to change legislation. I think the legislation we have now in place is effective. It actually accomplishes the goals that I would like to see as the Attorney General. It keeps people safe and protects our youth. So right now, the Cannabis Control Act is the law of the land. So at the moment, I'm aware of no initiative to change that law.
think the police have failed to enforce the existing law? Is that why you're?
No, not at all. In fact, I think our police services have worked very hard to deal with illegal cannabis in the province. We've had several actions across the province. The problem is now we're seeing an increased proliferation of these, and we have to make sure that the police know that this is now a provincial priority because of the recent expansion and the health damages that we're seeing, particularly in the area of proliferation among our youth. And they have to know that the government of Nova Scotia has their back, that we're behind them as they try to enforce this legislation.
Do the courts have enough room to deal with the fallout of this crackdown that you're looking for? Are you concerned about that side?
Well, we are taking a lot of steps to try to speed up the court system. There's some digital court systems. We're making other investments. We've added a bail court. So we're making some strong investments in Nova Scotia to make sure we deal with any backlog in the justice system. I'm fairly confident from the reports I've seen that some of those initiatives that we put forward are going to help us clear the system. But you know, the courts are part of this. But really, what's a big part of it is making sure that we have enough enforcement so that we can guarantee the products that people are ingesting across the province are safe.
Any final questions?
Minister, your staff really need to clarify this issue of how many
We'll get
illegal
back to you
dispensaries
for
there
sure
are.
of that.
We'll
Trust
make
me.
sure we get back to you on that, Paul, for sure, and everyone. Any final questions? Okay,
Can I just make a
sure
comment
thing.
to your question about the privatization model? I think we need to look into that much more, and you should, because certainly talking to my colleagues, the Ontario and BC models of privatization aren't all rosy by any means. They have huge numbers of outlets, so and the less ability to control those outlets in a privatized model. So I just had to say that in terms of putting forward a different model of privatization. It actually, we know that in other substances actually increases or lessens the ability to deal with public health and public safety issues. So I fully believe that the Nova Scotia model around the NSLC and a very tight regulatory approach is actually the best model to protect public health and public safety, not to privatize.
Thanks for that.
Thank you, Minister Armstrong, and thank you, Dr. Strang, and thanks everybody for attending.